You're listening to Ecto Portal, a journey into the unknown with Anthony Anderson and Verna Wilson.
I hope that you are seated comfortably with the light turned down and the curtains drawn.
Hello, once again, another journey into the unknown, the unexplored, the unexplained, Ecto Portal. I'm Anthony Anderson, your host, and I'm here with my co-host,
Verna Wilson.
And today's episode is going to be the mysterious disappearance of the Flannan Lighthouse keepers. Yes, it's an unusual story that happened in 1900 off the coast of Scotland. And we'll go into details about that, but it's an unusual case because there's not a lot of evidence left behind, but there are some interesting aspects about the case. And we'll go into that as soon as we get to that. First,
I actually remember hearing that story a long time ago.
Yeah?
Yeah. And I keep hearing all these lighthouse mysteries, but that one I've heard a long time ago. And
it's the type of story that probably In Search Of would have done.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe they did, and we just don't realize that. Or Unsolved Mysteries or something.
I haven't heard it in a long time, so I'm glad you're covering this one.
It's an unusual story. I'd never heard of it until, actually I was talking to someone about, they were going to do an investigation of the lighthouse on that island, and they were making, just trying to plan it out to see if it was possible. There's no word yet whether that is possible, but that would be a really cool investigation to stay there for the weekend, to stay in this lighthouse on this remote island. So,
as long as it's safe and it's because I'm sure a lot of these lighthouses are very old, aren't they?
Yeah,
yeah.
Exactly.
So as long as it's safe to stay there.
Yeah, this one actually was built in 1899 too. So
a lot of them are very old.
But they're pretty solid. I mean, they take care of them. They're automated now by machinery, most of them.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But there's like a helicopter helipad where they come and they maintenance it, make sure everything works good.
And I'm sure a lot of them were built to withstand all kinds of weather and all kinds of problems.
Salt.
Yeah, everything.
Salt air, salt water.
Yeah.
Going on now, the biggest footwear fiesta in southeast Missouri.
We have been expecting you.
Okay, tonight's show, I'll always say tonight no matter what, because obviously our podcasts are released on Wednesdays at 6 p.m. no matter what, anyway. Mm-hmm. Tonight is the mysterious disappearance of the Flannan Lighthouse keepers. One of the strangest stories of missing persons can be second-guessed to be murder, abduction, alien abduction, and beyond. And this one happened in 1900 off the coast of Scotland at the Flannan Lighthouse. Hold on just a second. Let me pull up my... I have a couple versions of this I had going on. I want to pull up my most recent one. The actual lighthouse itself, this happened in 1900 off the coast of Scotland at the Flannan Lighthouse. The lighthouse itself was built around 1899 in an isle called Eilean Moor. Mm-hmm. The lighthouse itself only employed 3 people, 2 regular keepers, and 1 who rotated now and then on the island from the mainland. The remainder of the island is empty and nobody else resides on the isle. The lighthouse is over 75 feet tall, and the grounds include a rail with a small docking yard that was used for supplies and any other structural hauling that might have been required. In the transatlantic pathway, many ships traveled to Leith, Scotland. This lighthouse was both crucial and important in that partnership. In 1900, a steamer called the Archer passed by the Isles. It was an American ship. Passed by the Isles and the Flannan Lighthouse on its return back from Philadelphia. What was truly odd is the lighthouse and its light were dark, a dangerous turn of events for any passing ship. The news of the dark lighthouse did not reach anyone until about 3 days later, when the ship docked in Leith. Investigation of the dark lighthouse had to ultimately delay even longer until after Christmas, just after Christmas Day due to bad weather. A relief boat, the Hesperus, made the journey to the island and discovered and concluded that the Flannan Lighthouse had gone dark and unmanned for days.
Huh.
Now, when the boat arrived, the things were not in normal order. The keepers were not there on the dock to meet the relief crew. There were no supplies or provisions stacked and waiting to be loaded on the boat. No flag was flying on the flagstaff, and Captain Jim Harvey sent up a flare to announce that their arrival, as well as blowing his whistle, but to no avail. There was no reply.
Wow.
He dispatched one of the smaller relief boats containing relief keeper Joseph Moore to the island to further investigate the odd emptiness of the whole situation. Upon arriving at the main compound, he discovered the gates were shut, as was the door to the main building. After gaining entry, he would discover no sign of the keepers, only an overturned chair near the kitchen table. Each of the beds was unmade, as if they had perhaps left them in a hurry. Strangely, the clock had stopped. He would return to the main vessel and relay the details of his find. He would then return to the island with a second seaman to investigate further and prepare a report. A further 2 seamen would volunteer to stay on the island to aid the investigation. Now, they would find that all the keepers' lamps were cleaned and refilled, as if they were ready for the next day. When we favor in the unmanned bed, this perhaps suggests something untoward happened during the night. Perhaps oilskins. Perhaps of more interest were the oilskins living in the quarters. This would suggest one of the keepers had ventured outside without them, perhaps in an extreme hurry. It would be freezing cold, too, off the Scotland coast.
Yeah.
Harvey would eventually send a telegram and report of the incident later that evening to the Northern Lighthouse Board. In it, he stated that a dreadful accident had occurred and that the 3 housekeepers had disappeared from the island. He would describe how they discovered no sign of life upon their arrival. Furthermore, he believed the accident must have happened about a week ago. He would further speculate that the poor fellows must have been blown over the cliffs or even drowned trying to secure a crane. He would finish by informing the board of his decision to leave Moore and 3 other crew members on the island to keep the light burning until you can make other arrangements. Rumors were abound. Moore would certainly make some interesting findings and some of his observations over the next couple days when he remained on the island. The log at the lighthouse was updated at 9 a.m. on the 15th of December. Given that the Archer noticed the light was unlit later that evening, we can assume that whatever caused them to disappear occurred at some stage during the next 12 hours or so after the log entry. There was also substantial damage on the west landing of the lighthouse compound. Moore would put down to damage from the storms that had battered the area in the days from the 15th to shortly after the 21st of December. Iron railings were bent completely out of shape, while the iron railway was ripped up from the concrete it was set into.
Jeez.
Furthermore, a large box had seemingly been blown in the air, its contents scattered around the area. Perhaps strangest of all, a rock weighing a ton had blown into the air and moved from its original position.
Yow.
It didn't take long for the rumors and conspiracy theories to begin, and with no proof of details to fill in the void of information, however outlandish, are as relevant as the next. These range from rumors that one of the men had murdered the other 2 and killed himself shortly after, to that the men had been taken by a giant bird or sea serpent. Other claims revolved around the ghost ships and their crew had claimed the 3 men, or that they were victims of foreign spies, maybe even spies themselves. Now, the official investigation by the Northern Lighthouse Board out of Edinburgh would begin on the 29th of December with the arrival of Robert Muirhead to the island. His conclusions were conservative on one hand, but also revealing on the other. For example, he would conclude that the 2 of the lighthouse keepers had left the lighthouse at some point in the day, possibly the late afternoon, and this was likely to investigate the west point of the compound due to suspected damage from the adverse weather. He stated that whoever remained in the lighthouse seemingly left of their own accord, likely to investigate the missing crew. This, he would state, was in breach of NLB rules. While that is quite possibly the case, it's an explanation a little too simplistic, even convenient for some. Other theories suggest that the west side of the compound was above a geo which terminates in a cave at the foot of the island. In a particular powerful storm, waters would rush into the caves and explode out of the top, right where the keepers might have been.
That makes more sense.
Yep. This would also explain why 2 keepers were outside and a 3rd keeper, possibly fully aware of what was about to happen, rushed from the table, leaving his oilskins in order to warn them.
Yeah, that makes sense.
However, at the same time, he would state the extent of the damage was too difficult to believe until seen up close. Whatever occurred then, even by Muirhead standards, it was something of an immense power that caused unprecedented damage. Was it merely a storm that had caused such a tragedy? Even a freak one? That it would only happen once in 70 years of its active existence is perhaps a stretch, at least for some. Maybe what took place in that December evening off the coast of Scotland was more extraordinary than a freak powerful storm. Maybe a leap given little information. There are those who believe the incident is a case of alien abduction. After all, Scotland certainly has a more of its fair share of such close encounter cases and UFO sightings. Might the damage to the iron railings and the iron railway be the result of some kind of close contact landing, or perhaps the consequence of technology deployed to abduct the keepers? Whatever took place, it appears to be a one-off incident, and that still wrecks the minds of those who continue to research and investigate today, over a century later, and likely will continue to do so for some time into the future.
And they didn't have the technology to look for stuff either.
Yeah, you didn't have forensics then.
No forensics or anything.
But what's weird is they said it was a half-eaten meal. The clock had stopped.
Yeah.
Like 3 o'clock. So it was, the one chair was overturned with a jacket on the back of it.
Which assumes somebody left in a hurry.
Yeah, the fact that one chair was overturned, it does sound like the other 2 were off doing something.
Yeah.
And that the other one was like running to them to aid them, help them, try to rescue them or whatever. What baffles me is I've never heard of water or waves bending iron railings in concrete.
I've never heard of that either. But then again, if it's really powerful, if it's forceful and powerful,
that it could still bend them?
They could still bend them. I don't think it's impossible.
But they've never had it happen before or since, and that's over 100 plus years. Isn't that a little odd?
Well, yes and no. I mean,
what about
there's a first time for everything, especially in that powerful weather out there in that isle.
What about the 1-ton boulder that moved through the air to another location?
If it's a storm and it's really powerful and it's powerful winds, it can move a boulder.
Yeah?
Yeah, I think it could. I mean, it could be 2 things. A case of getting caught in something really awful and not able to escape it.
One of the things they did find unusual is they found this box that they were talking about.
Yeah.
Normally keeps rope and other supplies in it.
Right.
They found the ropes scaled down the rocks. Dangling down the rocks. So someone had tied up ropes and they were hanging down the rocks.
So they, I wonder why they were trying to do that. So they were tying up the ropes. Possibly they were trying, you know what,
or was somebody stuck somewhere on the rocks and they were lowering the rope to get them to climb up?
Or either that or if it was a huge wave and there was water, they were trying to climb the rope to escape water, rising water.
Maybe it's their only way out.
Their only way out, and then and it went wrong.
Maybe.
That would make sense to me, especially a place like that where they're near really powerful water and there's strong wind.
Then you think about the UFO sightings in Scotland. Now this island, there was no other buildings on the island.
So it's isolated. It's isolated enough for that to be possible.
Now, a magnetic force of the UFO bending the iron railings.
That would make sense to me.
The magnetic pull.
Mm-hmm.
But would you find... Well, I guess they wouldn't really look to see if anything had landed
Yeah.
and burned any of the grass.
Mm-hmm.
They probably wouldn't think to look for that thing. They would never think UFO at that point.
Right.
I would have guessed they wouldn't think that would be a reason.
Yeah.
They would go with the tides are really strong and would bend the iron railings,
Mm-hmm. That
the
would
concrete.
make sense. Yeah.
But no, not a trace of the bodies. I mean, it's just weird to me. There's nothing.
Yeah, that. But then again, if and sadly, I hope this didn't happen, but if they were drowned out at sea trying to escape, and they went into the deep, that would have been very hard to retrieve their bodies. Maybe.
You would never be able to. It would sweep
You wouldn't be
them
able
out.
to.
That would be
it would be very hard.
The ocean would consume
I mean, I
them.
hope that didn't happen. It's awful, but it's very possible.
I know that local farmers would actually boat their sheep to the island to graze on the grass because it was so rich.
Yeah.
But they often said they heard wailings and cries on the island when they were there by themselves.
And they
This
didn't
is
know
after the fact.
they didn't know where it was coming from. Wow.
I'm sure they would know what the sound of the ocean and the wind would be like.
Oh yeah, if you're there enough, you know the sounds and yeah.
The differences between
The differences, yeah. So
But they said they would hear sounds of stuff in the wind on the island when they were with their cattle.
now you would think another thing that gets me about this case is that you would think these people working on this island and having emergency supplies would be well prepared for something like this to happen in case something goes wrong. You would hope.
But again, you would think so because they would be ready for. I mean, how many years did they run this lighthouse before that?
Yeah.
Because
And
somebody had to polish.
maybe nothing's gone wrong, and maybe they didn't think about it.
I mean, somebody literally has to polish the lantern every day
Every day, yeah,
to
that's
keep
true. To
the
keep
ships
it,
be able to see it.
yeah, that's true.
Now, there's a new article about possibly solving the mystery.
Okay.
Saying 4 days before Christmas, obviously the lighthouse keepers vanished. Not a single shred of evidence was ever found to the point where we have theories over the years that the men have been killed by pirates, eaten by seabirds, and even kidnapped by aliens. The author of a new book has finally shone a light on their Marie Celeste-style disappearance. Leading naturalist John Love has extensively researched the tragedy 20 miles off the tip of Lewis in the Outer Hebrides. Claims two of the keepers had been previously fined for not storing gear properly in a prior storm, and that must have been in the back of their minds. Instead of staying out of the fierce gale, they ventured out to make sure their equipment was safe, only to be hit by a huge wave. As part of his book, A Natural History of Lighthouses, Mr. Love managed to piece together a complete assessment of the mystery based on all the available records, to explain what happened to James Ducat, Thomas Marshall, and Donald MacArthur. However, the expert has rubbish claims of a toppled chair and a number of unfinished meals were found by rescuers on the day after Christmas. Mr. Love said it was only after 1912 when English poet Wilfred Wilson Gibson published his epic Flannan Isle that the story began to assume such an air of mystery, speculation, or even intrigue. For me and many others, including the lighthouse keepers themselves, there is no mystery and never has been. There is no need to invoke the sinister or the paranormal. It is purely a tragic act of nature that men got swept away by abnormally rough seas.
That's what I was saying.
His research has revealed Thomas Marshall had previously been branded negligent and fined 5 shillings after equipment was washed away during a fierce storm.
Ew.
With this hefty fine at the back of the men's minds, Mr. Love believes that they had ventured out to make everything more secure and also sealing their fate. Since it was not permitted for all 3 to abandon the lighthouse, only 2 of the men must have gone down to the landing to secure the gear. The third, Donald MacArthur, would have remained back in the lighthouse, but when his companions did not return, he would have been concerned about their safety, or else perhaps he saw a great wave approach and rushed to warn them. MacArthur may have only been too late, only then to be swept away himself. He says the lighthouse keepers, the first at the newly built lighthouse, may not have been totally familiar with the winter storm conditions around the island. So that's interesting.
The more I think about it, the more it sounds like an awful accident that they just got caught up in.
But why? What really gets me is why would I could see if the two went down to secure equipment and got swept away by the storm.
Mm-hmm.
But what would, unless the third one actually got down to where they were and were helping them,
Yeah.
and then they all got swept away. But what would prompt that third person to go down there?
Well, he could have heard yelling for help.
It's pretty far away with the crashing waves and the wind. I don't know if you'd hear anybody.
Well, it's a island where it's kind of isolated. You could probably hear a lot in an isolated place like that.
I don't know. I just know when I was in Ireland standing on the coast,
Yeah.
somebody could be 50 feet away and say something to you, and you don't hear them at all because you hear the ocean
Or it could be
crashing
this.
on the waves, on the rocks.
Or it could be they were taking too long to what they were supposed to be doing, and he thought, I better go look for them and see what happened.
That could be.
Yeah.
That makes more sense to me. Like, oh my God, they've been gone so long. Why is it taking them so long? I should go
Right.
check on them.
I should go check on them, and I'll be right back.
But
Wh-
why
which
would
is
he
why-
then get washed out?
Well, because whatever happened, he...
Or he did find that something happened to him. They were still alive on the rocks. Got the rope, tied it, threw it down to them, tried to help them,
Could have been, yeah.
and then they were all washed out.
Right. That makes sense. That he got caught up in whatever was going on with them, and it was pretty awful.
Or we go the UFO angle, and they went out to do that, were approached by a UFO. Entangled with that, this guy saw the UFO from wherever he was at, went out to try and see what was going on. It affected all three of them. Zap, gone. The UFOs took off.
Well, if well, you never know. I mean, yeah, that could have been.
I don't know. It's definitely one of those. How will we ever know the truth about
How
this
would
story?
we ever know? Yeah. I mean, if we're gonna talk about a freak of nature, then getting caught up in an unfortunate accident, well, it's very possible in a place like that.
And the guy who designed the lighthouse
Uh-huh.
was a relative of Robert Louis Stevenson,
Oh, wow.
which I thought was an interesting
That is interesting.
connection there.
That's very interesting.
Not that there's anything paranormal about that, but
No.
it's a nice historical little reference there.
Yeah, that is. But now but it is kind of an interesting connection though. Robert Louis Stevenson, he was familiar with the sea and with stuff like that, and he knew and well, so his relative would have known the risks and what goes into building something safely to withstand problems.
It could have just been a freak powerful storm that had never happened before, and literally just pushed them right into the ocean.
Exactly. That to me makes sense, especially with the rope and somebody hurrying to wondering what happened, and I better find out if everything's okay, and leaving, and I'll be right back, and leaving.
But why would his chair be overturned? That's panic.
Well, that's panic, but probably
So-
because he, like I said, he might have heard yelling from a distance, and it could have been loud enough to reach him.
He just
Yeah.
jumped up, chair fell back, and he ran out.
Yeah,
Didn't even
exactly.
grab his coat.
Didn't even grab his coat. So I mean, yeah. So that's somebody hurrying away. So
Well, what about the sea serpent idea?
the sea serpent idea. Oh, I don't
Theory
know
about a giant sea serpent
I
grabbed
don't
them, bent the railings on the dock landing pad or the dock.
what kind of sea serpent. I mean,
Well, if you have Nessie, why couldn't you have a giant sea serpent?
have they seen giant sea serpents around that area before?
Not, I guess not Live.
Unless it was an eel or something. I don't
Not
know.
Live to tell about it.
No, I mean,
I don't know. We've had an episode about sea monsters before.
we have, but I mean,
The Hucklefucker.
whatever that was.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, right.
There's some
Trying to
big
pronounce
ones.
that name. I'm sure there's a lot of creatures within the deep that we don't know
You sound
about.
like you don't believe there could be creatures like that, though.
No, I do.
You just don't think they could have attacked these guys? That's a meal.
I think.
Some 3 meals.
No,
on
I
the
believe.
shore.
No, here's my theory about that. I believe those types of creatures exist.
Yeah.
But I believe that they exist, that they are so remote and they are so deep within those waters that we don't know about them. We haven't seen them.
Yeah.
Which I'm glad I haven't seen them. I'm glad. But but how likely, if that's the truth, how likely are they to come up and, after being deep within the waters for a while, come up just for one freak accident and say, here's a meal, here's 3 guys.
Yeah.
It just sounds off color to me.
Yeah.
I can't help it.
How about this? Do you believe the sea serpent story more than the UFO?
No.
You believe the UFO before you'll believe the sea monster.
Yeah. What about you?
Yeah, same here.
Yeah.
I think the sea monster's really stretching it.
Yeah, the sea monster's really stretching it because it sounds like something out of it sounds like Moby Dick. Like Moby Dick came out or something and decided.
Or a Sinbad movie.
Yeah, or a Sinbad movie, yeah. Rather than, the UFO, I'm a little skeptical about that, but it's an isolated place. Things have happened, and I'm more likely to believe that than the sea monster.
Yeah.
But the storm part and a freak storm causing panic, to me, sounds more likely than all 3 of those stories.
And you got to wonder. I mean, I thought about this after I watched. There's a TV show that does a story about this called Vanishings.
Oh, yeah.
It's on the History Channel.
Uh-huh.
And I thought, what about weapons? Would they, if they had sensed any kind of danger from something, they would have grabbed weapons. I'm assuming there's going to be weapons on the island. If there was pirates around still.
Okay, the pirates thing, I forgot
there's
about
still
that.
going to be weapons on the island. You
Yeah.
have to defend the lighthouse, I'm assuming.
Right.
I didn't read about any weapons existing. There must be some.
Now, when pirates landed someplace, didn't they usually have a record about... Now, wait a minute. It's a lighthouse. They would see pirates landing ahead of time because they can see what boats are coming in.
You would think, yeah.
So the pirate landing and them not being prepared for it, to me, doesn't sound plausible.
And why would a pirate ship want to land on a lighthouse? You're not going to get much from a lighthouse.
No. So that to me doesn't seem very plausible.
Yeah. But I'm saying they must have had weapons to defend the lighthouse, period.
Yeah.
Because they were talking spies, all that kind of stuff, too.
And if there were pirates landing to rob them,
Mm-hmm.
and, if they're hungry if there are some hungry pirates that are broke and they need to rob somebody, they would have been able to spot them ahead of time. They're a lighthouse. They're tall. It's a tall place.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it doesn't seem plausible.
But again, and even if they did land, you couldn't stop them from docking.
No,
But
you couldn't.
Unless you had
But
weapons
you
of some
would
kind.
be able to fortify yourself ahead of time if you were in a high lighthouse like that.
Yeah, I'm assuming they still would have had weapons of some kind. I'm guessing, but I'm pretty positive.
Unless they were careless and they weren't prepared and they didn't look for them and say,
Or someone else docked. It wasn't a pirate.
yeah,
It could have been some other ship that docked.
they docked and robbed them.
Mm-hmm.
Could have been.
Killed them, dumped them. But
Yeah.
nothing was missing, though. They said
Nothing was missing. Yeah, and they didn't find other.
So that's a little
Sometimes
weird.
things float out. Unfortunately, with accidents, sometimes things float out to the shore, and they could find something.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think they found any kind of evidence
Nope.
that. Yeah.
Nothing was out of place except for those few things.
So they didn't have a whole lot to go by, really.
Well, whatever happened, they were obviously set their meal down to eat,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what interrupted their meal. Something interrupted the meal.
Yeah, something did. So
Question is what?
what did? Yeah. I still say he might have heard them calling and yelling for help, and that's why. Because
Yeah.
the third person has to stay behind, and for him not to stay behind and thrown over his chair, he might have heard yelling for help, and he thought, I better go now before this gets any worse.
Yeah, the scaled rope on the rocks to down below makes me think that he was trying to rescue someone,
Yeah,
or save
exactly.
someone, or have someone climb up something, or haul something up, maybe.
Now they're still trying to solve this case. What are they looking for now that would make them want to solve it now, as opposed to then?
Well, it's not that they're wanting to solve it. There's people contemplating, like we are, about what could have happened.
Have they gone down to the actual site to
Of
try to
course.
solve it?
of many times. But I mean, now it's like I said. Now it's automated. It's an automated lighthouse. It has been since 1971.
Okay, so they don't need people there anymore.
But I think it's enough time has passed where it's not going to make any difference if you try and solve it. You're not going to find any additional information at this point that's ever going to tell you what really happened.
Okay. I know that going back to the original environment and looking at the conditions and everything would give them a new idea. Okay.
Well, especially with science and technology.
And this could have happened, that could have happened, but I don't. But they're no closer to resolving what happened than they were.
You could do tests about the impact of water against iron.
Have they
tried?
it
bend? Can it throw a rock? You know what I mean? That kind of stuff.
Right. Have they tried to talk to the relatives of the people who died and see if they heard anything, what they heard back then when they originally did this case?
Well, there wouldn't be much to hear because if they disappeared, there's nothing to say,
There's
right?
nothing to say, yeah.
I mean, other than hearsay about everyone else, like, oh, so-and-so, they were pretty careless with the equipment, and the fact that they were out there probably trying to secure it when they forgot and they got swept away, that's not a surprise. Like that one article said that was pretty common with these two.
No, didn't they say that they were a little negligent on...
Two of them were fined for negligence for that.
So so if they were careless and they continue to be careless, they paid the price, unfortunately.
Yeah, and so did the third guy.
That's sad. That
It
is
is
so
sad.
sad. I'm so sorry.
But,
I know it's too late to be sorry, but I'm sorry.
Yeah. We'll never know, though. But
we'll never know.
It's interesting, though, because at least when you have phantom ships, same thing where the entire crew has disappeared. There's no bodies. There's no struggles. There's no blood. But yet the ship's still there, but the entire crew is missing. To me, that stuff is kind of weird, because you think even a ship that's still afloat and didn't sink, you would have somebody hurt, wounded, killed, left behind.
You would have some kind of evidence about what happened.
Yeah.
And they probably have found it in some abandoned ships.
Probably, but then there's others where they've been floating for 60 years. They find and there's no trace of humans left.
Well, of course not, especially after all these bad storms, bad weather conditions,
birds,
and everything's
animals.
washed out and...
Birds that come in and eat.
Yeah.
But do you think you'd find like skeletons? But you're right, I guess if water waves...
If it washed it all out.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's hard to say.
Ugh.
Yay.
Yuck. Awful. Terrible.
But it's...
Terrible, but interesting at the same time.
Yep.
When it's like one of those mysteries that you just... Well, people have been speculating for decades, like us.
True.
But,
So their official record is that they were swept out to sea.
Well...
At the time, that's what the official record that was written up said.
It makes more sense, but I know a way that they could find out what happened.
Mm-hmm.
Nowadays, you have computers that can actually go back to what the weather conditions were like in certain places from way back, and they can go back to years, and they can go back to detecting what weather was like. If they go back to that date...
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah. If they go back to that date...
Yeah.
And they go back to that time, and they talk about... And they go back to reports, or the computer can simulate what the weather was from back then, that gives them more of a clue. I'm
True.
surprised they haven't tried that yet.
Yeah, that's the kind of stuff some of those TV shows do, is to do stuff like that.
Right, because I remember I was watching a documentary where they were talking about astronomy, but they were talking about astronomy. What patterns the stars were back in a certain year, and they had a computer simulate what pattern the stars were. They could do it for weather too.
Yeah. Well,
so that would give a great clue.
One article I read said the day that they disappeared, the sea was calm.
Okay.
In the records of the sea storms,
okay,
there was no storm and did not hit until the next day after.
Well, even a calm sea, though, can have huge waves.
Well, you could still have accidents even when I mean, maybe it wasn't the sea that did it. Maybe something happened and they fell into the ocean and drowned or something.
Well, if it's a rock, and the rocks were screwed up.
Maybe it was an explosion of some kind.
Yeah, if it was a rock and the rocks were screwed up, then I can see an accident really happening, and it doesn't matter what the weather was. If you lost your balance or you got screwed up trying to do something.
Yep.
And you know how it is around the seas that around when you're near rocks and the sea, it's sharp and it's risky and.
And I guess years after this happened, there were stories about ghosts and stuff on those islands because of that.
Well,
they're called the Phantom of the Seven Hunters because these 7 islands they called the Seven Hunters. So, and there was actually a 1912 song written by Flannan Isle by Wilford Wilson Gibson. And this is part of his description from that. Yet as we crowded through the door, we only saw a table spread for dinner, meat, and cheese and bread. But all untouched and no one there, as though when they sat down to eat, ere they could even taste, alarm had come and they in haste had risen and left the bread and meat, for at the table head a chair lay tumbled on the floor.
Wow.
So that's part of his song that he wrote.
Oh wow! So he's recalling everything was left as a okay. He was recalling the whole incident where they all left in a hurry and
Exactly, and that's why this guy's book is saying, well, some of this could be just taken from his song. That he was, a lot of the details are from his song and didn't really actually happen in the real case, but it is written in the report, so some of those details are true.
Huh.
So it's
it would be an interesting island to go and investigate any paranormal activity.
This is with the group I was in Ireland with. They were thinking they're trying to get to go to that island for the weekend.
Oh wow!
Or for a week or whatever it is.
It'd be cool if you can go with them.
I know, but I don't know. I don't know that you would want to investigate more than a couple days. I don't know what else you would really find there.
Right. And are there
other than isolation?
Right, because where would you stay? I mean, do they have?
It's got to be small.
I mean, do they have like little bed and breakfasts or?
No, there's nothing there still.
Nothing
Just
still.
What was there 100 years ago?
So you would have to go for maybe an afternoon or a day and go back because where would you stay?
Yep. You have to rough it or sleep on the floor.
Yeah,
and
or if you go in the lighthouse, but it's if they let you, I don't know.
Well, they would. That would be part of the thing. I would imagine they would give you a tour of the lighthouse like during the day, but then after that, you got
to go home, Charlie.
They would probably they'd probably let you investigate because there's probably a locked door at the top. Mm-hmm. So you could climb all the way up, but you couldn't go out into the actual equipment on top. Yeah. Where the lantern is, but I'm sure that if they allowed it, they would allow that kind of stuff. Or why would you go? Mm-hmm. But I said I'm all for it. If you ever hear any more about it, I'll do it. Yeah. I haven't heard any more about it, so I don't know if it's an actual thing or not.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
And I haven't heard of anybody investigating I think the Scottish Isles themselves, all of the Scottish Isles near Scotland, would be great places to investigate because of all the legends and all this, everything that happened around there.
Yep. Mm-hmm. There's a lot.
Besides that one, a lot of them would be.
I agree.
The Isle of Iona would be a great place. Yeah. Especially with all the monuments, the stone monuments there. Yeah. Would be a great place too.
There's a lot of William Wallace locations I think would be interesting. Mm-hmm. In fact, when I go to Scotland, there's a monument where William Wallace was actually executed and torn apart before they shipped his body parts to different Scottish rulers to say, here's what happened to your king.
Yikes.
Yeah, as a warning.
Yeah. They did a lot
Very Game of Thrones.
They did a lot of ugly things back then to people who happened to be caught in a war or executed. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So
yeah.
I don't know. It's an interesting case, but I don't know if we'll ever have the answer to this disappearance of these 3 lighthouse keepers. But I thought it was,
if any listeners,
it's mysterious, unknown, unexplored.
we're always open to feedback. If anybody here knows about this case and something that we haven't discussed, we're open to hearing about it.
That's right.
Yeah.
All right, folks. That's another episode of Ecto Portal. And until next time, we'll have another story or another experience for you to listen to. Until then, Bye.
Bye.